He requested office keys for his father, Joe Biden, to an office Hunter planned to share with the Chinese emissary.
You have a good side and the greedy side. So if people cannot hold up their moral values, it's very easy to be corrupted.
Yeah.
And the Chinese Communist Party, they are at the best to corrupt people. They see people's weakness.
Yeah.
And instead of Canada saying, you're right, what are we thinking? The entire Trudeau government says, yeah, you stupid Americans, we're with China now.
Check out this. Holy cow. Whoa. On Salt Spring Island. And they're all Chinese military. I wonder what it is.
Here he is when he was asked about Canada-China relations and on what terms.
Within 24 hours of arriving in China, I was invited to present my credentials to President Xi Jinping, and I conveyed to him a message from our Prime Minister that can be summarized in 3 words: more, more, more. Or in Mandarin, geng dua, geng dua, geng dua.
Hey everybody, it's Everett with Ohio for Freedom, and today we pay tribute to our great friends of the North, home of the Northern Rockies. They share with us the Great Lakes, host of the Stratford, Ontario Shakespeare Festival. They have French-speaking Quebec. They've given to us musical greats like the Guess Who, Bachman-Turner Overdrive, Helen Reddy, Gordon Lightfoot, and the sometimes appearing in blackface Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I speak of none other than Chinada. In round 2, we're going to talk about that beverage that has taken the world by storm, the pause that always oppresses, China Crush. Lot to talk about. Let's get started.
I hear the sweet sound of freedom, and I won't be
Okay, folks, so as always, please like, share, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, please hit the notifications bell. Please leave a comment. We're trying to fight back against Facebook, which we hate. And then lastly, get on Parler, get on Parler, get on Parler, get on Parler. Speaking to a friend of mine who was with an advocacy group in Southeast Ohio. He says, I get your videos, but I can never share them. And I said, that's because that's what Facebook does. And then he told me, he said, I'm in Facebook jail. I said, get on Parler. Get on Parler and phase over a period of time and eventually leave Zuckerberg in the dust. Okay, now the title, Chinada. Let me be real clear. I have French-Canadian ancestry. My dad was my grandfather was, okay? I have a French-Canadian last name. I'm talking about Chinada because I don't want it to become a reality, and I certainly don't want to live in CHIMERICA. Am I making that clear? Okay, so don't anybody be offended. All right, so how did I stumble on this little theme? Earlier in the week on Tuesday, I found out that we had an F-16 fighter jet that went down in Michigan, and the official story seems kind of lame. I heard some unofficial stuff that would seem to indicate that there may be some other factors that we'll talk about, but in the process of researching that, I found out that there have been Chinese troops, we think, in Canada. Chinese troops training in Canada. But we know for a fact that the Prime Minister of Canada has engaged in talks with China for cold weather training. And now, let me ask you a question, Americans out there. If you knew that there were Chinese troops that were training right here in Ohio, would it get your attention? Well, Canada's kind of connected to us. I'm going to play a clip and then explain where it came from. Let's go.
Thus far, the Chief of the Defense Staff has unilaterally elected not to proceed with one bilateral military activity training exercise planned for 2019, a winter survival training exercise.
The information came from a 34-page classified document from the Canadian government. The gentleman that you heard speaking is named Ezra Levant, Canadian journalist. He heads up a website, Rebel News. I don't know how I stumbled upon this guy, but here's the story behind the document. He had seen in 2018 a press release or a story from Sputnik, a Soviet website, that was talking about a 70th anniversary event that happened in China for the PLA, People's Liberation Army. There was like a naval flotilla parade to honor how great and how wonderful China is. And the article from Sputnik was saying that Canada participated. Ezra Levant couldn't believe it, so he sent the equivalent of a Freedom of Information request to the Canadian government. They blew him off. No response, no response. 19 months later, he receives this 34-page document that is highly redacted. All the stuff is blacked out that they don't want him to see, except for some reason, instead of being blacked out, it was grayed out. So you can still see it. He doesn't know if it was a whistleblower or if it was a mistake. But in that document from which he just read, and you can go to his website. He's got a website for that specifically, the ChinaFiles.com. But we find out that there was the negotiations for what was to happen in 2019, cold weather training for Chinese troops in Canada, in North America, on North American soil. Now that didn't end up happening, and the biggest concern and the biggest reason there were all these redactions was because they wanted to hide from the Canadian public just how nervous and how scared little Justin was that he might hurt China's feelings. But I'm going to show you a piece of video from October of this year that shows what certainly looks to be Chinese troops training on Salt Spring Island near Vancouver. Let's take a look.
Military personnel on the road coming up. Check out this. Holy cow. Whoa. On Salt Spring Island. And they're all Chinese military. I wonder what it is.
Now here in the States, we're big on diversity, right? So I put that in the editor and blew it up because I wanted to look a little closer. So I'm going to play that for you right now. But I want you to ask yourself, how much diversity am I seeing in these troops?
Whoa. On Salt Spring Island. And they're all Chinese military. Wow. I wonder what it is.
Now, unfortunately, when you blow it up like that, you're not able to clearly see facial features, but you can pretty clearly see skin tone and hair color, can you not? And let me be clear, I don't care what anybody's skin tone or hair color is. Don't care about that at all. But I do know that here in North America, you're not going to find U.S. troops or Canadian troops where every single head of hair is the same color. So I don't know how to explain this, except maybe the guy was right. Maybe there was Chinese troops on Salt Spring Island there near Vancouver earlier this year. I'm going to play one more clip from this, and I would encourage you, if you got the time, but it's a lot of information, the ChinaFiles.com and the Rebel newsletter that Ezra Levant sets up is very good. I'm going to play one more clip and talk about that because I want to get to China Crush very quickly.
All leading to this. Look at this part. Look at the very, very dark part in paragraph 2. I'll read it out if you can't quite see it. The review is also driven by concerns expressed by the United States military that at least one element of Canada-China military collaboration planned for 2019 risks unintended and undesired knowledge transfer from Canada to the PLA.
Unintended knowledge transfer? Well, duh. And whose knowledge may you unintentionally transfer? Is it just Canadian Cold War fighting tactics knowledge? Not necessarily, because as Ezra Levant points out, the U.S. has been subsidizing Canadian military for decades, all through the Cold War, all through the War on Terror. And so you're not only betraying, potentially, your fellow Canadians, but your partners, your allies. And by extension, you're betraying the Five Eye Alliance, which is America, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand. But Justin Trudeau is a great resetter. He is more in sync with China than with the rest of the Five Eyes and the rest of the free Western world. And how does his ambassador feel about it? I'm going to replay a clip of his ambassador as he's relating Justin's true feelings of affection for President Xi Jinping.
Within 24 hours of arriving in China, I was invited to present my credentials to President Xi Jinping, and I conveyed to him a message from our Prime Minister that can be summarized in 3 words: more, more, more. Or in Mandarin, geng dua, geng dua, geng dua.
Well, I got 3 words to describe that guy. Sick, sick, sick. Sell out, sell out, sell out. Betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. That's the ambassador and Justin Trudeau. By the way, earlier I misspoke. I said Helen Reddy. Helen Reddy's from Australia. I think I was thinking of Anne Murray, so my apologies there. But on the subject of music, let me tie this in. When I was 8 years old, we moved, my family and I moved from Brownsville, Tennessee, to Defiance, Ohio, and the main radio station that we listened to in those days was CKLW from Detroit, but it was actually a Windsor, Ontario station. And there was such a thing in those days as Canadian content law, which meant that a radio station had to play a certain amount of Canadian content to have a license. And so it's argued that some Canadian artists were helped by that. I would say in the case of the Guess Who, Bachman Turner Overdrive, it wouldn't have made any difference. Great bands, by the way. One of my all-time great favorite singers would be Burton Cummings of the Guess Who, but I digress. But my point for bringing this up is there was at least a time when Canadian officials were very loyal and patriotic and wanted to promote the Canadian brand. Justin Trudeau is a great resetter, and we're going to talk about that at another point. Now, I want to make a segue into this theory of mine called China Crush, the pause that always oppresses. But I actually think a really good segue would be for me to read a couple of paragraphs from an article that's up right now on Hal Turner's website. It's public, and it has to do with the complete duck, the complete dodge, the complete betrayal by the U.S. Supreme Court as regards that Texas lawsuit, because it sets the stage for who knows what's going to happen. But I want to take you into this article, and then we're going to talk about it. This is from Hal Turner's website. I'm going to read it to you as best as I can. Here's the title: Unlocked for Public. Loud Arguments in U.S. Supreme Court. Chambers over Texas lawsuit. Court intimidated. This article was previously locked and for subscribers only. It has been unlocked at the personal request of Steve Quayle from a source deep inside the U.S. Supreme Court as they discussed the pending Texas lawsuit against Pennsylvania. Hal, as you know, I'm a clerk for one of the justices on the Supreme Court of the United States. Today was like nothing we've ever seen. The justices are arguing loudly behind closed doors. Justices met in a closed and sealed room, as is standard. Usually it's very calm. However, today we could hear screaming all the way down the hall. They met in person because they didn't trust telephonic meeting as secure. Chief Roberts was screaming, "Are you going to be responsible for the rioting if we hear this case? Don't tell me about Bush v. Gore. We weren't dealing with riots then. You are forgetting what your role here is, Neil, and I don't want to hear from the 2 junior justices anymore. I will tell you how you will vote." Justice Clarence Thomas says it's the end of democracy, John. When they left the room, Roberts, the Libs, and Kavanaugh had big smiles. Alito and Thomas were visibly upset. ACB and Gorsuch didn't seem fazed at all. Now, if that reporting is accurate, it simply tells us what we already knew. John Roberts is a traitor and he's a coward. He's a traitor and he's a coward. That's no surprise. But if that tells us that that is stopped dead in its tracks, where does it leave us? By the way, there's still some other things that are working their way towards the Supreme Court, but maybe God is not going to choose to use the Supreme Court as his vehicle of deliverance. But just make no mistake about it. My position on Donald Trump being sworn in for a second consecutive term has not changed. So where does that leave us? I want to remind us all that the executive order that was signed in September of 2018 has 2 45-day periods in it. And at the end of the first 45-day period, a report, no later than 45 days, is to be delivered to the president, and it involves the Director of National Intelligence and other heads, okay? But when is that date? It's December 18th. For everybody that's out there, oh my God, they're gonna vote on the 14th, they're gonna vote. Chill out, chill out. But this is big stuff. It's big stuff. There's also talk of the use of the Insurrection Act, and I'm not advocating or not advocating. I'm just throwing stuff out there that everybody has heard. But at any rate, I want to go to this. There are multiple sources now that are reporting that we have aircraft carriers positioned off the West Coast, off near Oregon, Washington, down by San Diego, on the East Coast, closer to South Carolina, and further north, closer to Connecticut. At the same time, it has been reported, multiple sources, that there were those 25 C-17s that flew into Nellis last Saturday evening in the wee hours without press releases, and 12 C-130s filled with troops and stuff. And I'll also just bring to everybody's remembrance that Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller, the Special Forces are now a completely distinct and separate branch, and they report directly to him. So there's some type of preparation that seems to be going on. Now, having said that, what do I mean by this China crush? I want to talk just briefly about the squeeze, the crush that the CCP, Communist Chinese Party, is trying to put on the United States. And by this idea of troop training, which, by the way, you go into that document, it talks about training, ground level troops. It also talks about one-on-ones with 2- and 3-star generals. Why in the world would Canada, Justin Trudeau, want to train 2- and 3-star generals? Anyway, I want to show you this little map that I drew, and then we're going to talk about it. Let's go. Okay, so on the fly, I want to draw out my little China crush map. I hope I don't leave anything out, but let's just start here with Georgia, because we know Brian Kemp really loves the Chinese there in Georgia. And then jump up here to Delaware, where you have the Bidens, and of course you have all the corrupt people in Washington, D.C. Then we don't want to forget, I'm trying to hit New York, that'd be Wall Street, which is mentioned quite a bit. Something that happened in Maine we may or may not talk about. Then up here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is where that F-16 went down. I think that's suspicious. And then this would be up in Ontario, approximately where Camp Petawawa is, the base where they trained some of the Chinese military. And up here is what I'm calling Vancouver area. So that's Salt Spring Island, where those troops were spotted. Would they take advantage of the unrest in Washington and Oregon? I think maybe, but we know that definitely here in California, you got Dianne Feinstein, and there's one counselor office in California they just don't want to close, but huge. We should just really go over that like crazy. Then don't forget ballots crossing the Mexican border into Texas, and don't forget all the people that were arrested in Texas. I think that's about where Houston is. Oh, and we almost forgot Eric Fartwell over here. You start looking at how much of this red encircles continental United States, and you get an idea of the orange crush. Okay, crude map, but you get the idea. Red circle around the United States. And how much more dangerous does that circle become with the Prime Minister of Canada so friendly with the CCP? Gets pretty scary. How close to a showdown could we come? The day before Pearl Harbor, I imagine if you asked the average American, do you think they're going to bomb Hawaii, bomb Pearl Harbor? They'd have thought you're crazy. They'd have thought you're nuts. But things like that do happen. So how close could we be coming to something like that? What if the Insurrection Act is invoked? What if on the 45th day of this executive order What if some drastic action has to be taken? How would the left would react? How would they react? Would they call upon the UN to deal with this renegade president who won't leave? And if they called upon the UN, what's the strength of the UN? Is it not the CCP? Now, it has been suspicioned, and I'm just going to briefly mention it, but it's been suspicioned by some pretty credible sources that F-16 fighter jet that went down in the Upper Peninsula on Tuesday, that there might have been some type of CCP reason for that to have happened. I'll just leave it like that. There was also something similar that was suspicioned in Maine within the last week. Do I have a way of verifying it? No. But how close are we coming? And if we avoid such a, I'll say, showdown, once this president is inaugurated, we've got a lot of house cleaning to do, and we need to really, really completely rethink our attitude towards the Chinese Communist Party. I want to close, but first I want to read a paragraph that I think sums up the state of the world pretty good. It was from Worldview Weekend. I want to read you this paragraph, and then let's put a bow on it. Here we go. It's also time to stop saying we won the Cold War. As of this moment, the communists control the mineral storehouses of Africa. They have the masses of China. They have the military technology of Russia. They have Cuba, Nicaragua, and the oil fields of Venezuela. Their Iranian allies can disrupt the flow of oil from the Middle East. They threaten India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, don't forget New Zealand. The free world is on the brink of an abyss. On the brink, but we can come back. And I think that was very, very, very well said. You know, I just want to close by saying this. I've actually been shocked. I mean, I've just been like stupefied with this whole lockdown pandemic thing to watch the complete eradication of personal freedoms that I've seen in Australia and in New Zealand. It's completely baffled me because I think of our cultures as being so similar. But I think I've realized that the reason is because of their proximity to China and the influence of the CCP. And then you see, once again, and that's the theme of this video, Chinada. You see this prime minister that is so in lockstep with China. This election in the United States and Donald Trump being inaugurated is so important, or there's about 5 different names that we're going to have to get familiar with. Here they are. Chinada, Chaustralia, Chimerica, New Zealand, and Chingland. How's that? We don't want to see that happen. There's a lot that could be said. I've said too much already. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please leave a comment. Please find me on Parler at Ohio for Freedom, at Ohio for Freedom with no spaces, and you'll find it. And until next time, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless the state of Ohio. And God bless the United States of America, where Donald Trump will be the second consecutive president with the number 45 mark on it. Bye.